Evan, you'd mentioned the culture is being established within these meetings a couple of times in our conversation. So tell our listeners more. How does the collaborative leadership, the virtual immersion program specifically, impact organizational culture?
Well, when we've done this as a broader cultural intervention, the truth is we've started with the C team and trained them with these skills, right? Because they are the role models for what collaboration looks like broader in the organization. Everything rolls downhill. And then we'll begin training the next level and the skip level down. If you build a cadre of people who are good at collaborative leadership, good at knowing the real art is to get the right experts together, right? You are really good at getting them from a process standpoint to engage, and you are very good at being clear why you're having the meeting, what you're trying to get done. If we change that dynamic, right, it completely transforms the culture of the organization because people are not wasting time and they're used to, coming into meetings. It's meaningful, it's purposeful, we get it done, and we end up having less of them. So just because we spend so much time in meetings, if we can change even just a little bit the culture of meetings, we will change the culture of the organization.
Yeah. And I think, Evan, a part of that couple of items that really contribute to a positive organizational culture is that idea you'd mentioned before with allowing space, right? That two-way dialogue and creating empathy, which is part of that is listening to people. And I think all too often, I totally agree that you get into these meetings and it becomes basically a monologue or a dissertation or a lecture at times. And, you don't accomplish that mission. You're really not allowing that two-way dialogue to talk about the purpose, objectives, process, agreements, consensus, and so forth. And I think that's a major negative contribution to organizational culture. But what can you elaborate on in terms of the concept of virtual skill transfer and its significance in today's digital workplace? Can you share with our listeners what do you mean by that exactly? Virtual skill transfer?
Well, what I mean is, look, we're transferring the skills to work in a virtual environment. Mm-hmm. Everything we've done for decades, of course, we were teaching people how to work in a room together. Those days have changed, right? You're not going to get everybody back in the office, although I imagine a lot of CEOs would like to, because I imagine they're all struggling with how do we create a culture of commitment when, I never ever perhaps have seen this person face to face. But by virtual skill transfer, what we mean is you're going to run these virtual meetings, you better be good at it. And so what we're trying to do is give them real skill around running the virtual collaboration. Now, we used to run programs, as I said, face to face, and we still have a couple clients who like to run the old version, right? Where we're teaching them how to run this same set of skills of collaboration sitting in a room together. But the reality is all their meetings are still hybrid. The reason they want to run it face to face is for culture building, team building purposes. But really, all virtual skill transfer means is one, transferring how to run high stakes facilitated meetings and do it in the context of running it over our laptops or desktop computers. And so it's just a matter of teaching people the art of facilitation in a setting where people are remote.
Yeah. So, Evan, we've talked throughout this conversation today, this idea about the model of, effective virtual communication, the execution of that model. And then we talked a little bit about measurement. But what role does in-depth feedback play in your training programs? And how does that contribute to long-term cultural change? I mean, obviously, I assume that that's a pretty significant mechanism in your program.
Oh, it's the bulk of the program, right? People have to practice and get feedback. And this applies culturally from a continuous improvement. In meetings, we want to build in feedback loops, right? So one of the 5 core things is landing the plane. People do a really bad job of landing the plane. So they could have facilitated a great meeting, but what often the trap we get into is as we're running out of time, instead of landing the plane, we actually keep going. Right? The metaphor, again, with the plane flight is when we're running out of fuel, we don't say to the pilot, fly faster. What we say is, we better find a field to land in. And it's the same principle in a meeting. The last, 5% of a meeting, right? It's about landing. Now, to get back to feedback, part of the landing, right, is one, making sure you achieve the objectives. And if you didn't get everything done, what are you going to do next? And then making sure every single person drops off that call crystal clear who's going to do what by when. So there's not any wasted time. They know immediately who needs to do what by when, and you as the leader can hold them accountable. The last thing we want to do is build in after action reviews at the meeting level, right? Plus delta, well done, take a look at, because feedback, is the mechanism by which any organization gets better. Now, we always encourage our participants when they leave the program to ask for feedback on how they ran the meeting, because that's how we get better at anything. So in the program, it's about feedback, but we also want people to go run their meetings where they build feedback loops into them so they get better and better over time.
Mm-hmm. So that said, Evan, for a PE firm considering your program, what are the key takeaways for their portfolio companies in terms of performance and productivity enhancement?
Well, I mean, suppose the key takeaways is they're going to have a lot of meetings, right? They're moving fast. We better make these meetings good. And so really, coming back to what we've been talking about, I think it's just the realization that the culture of how they run their meetings is going to shape the culture of performance of the organization. And so PE firms need to think about the fact that their leaders are the ones who are modeling the culture for the organization. And if you want them to create a collaborative culture, they need the skills to know how to engage a group. And that's really what I think a lot of PE firms probably need to think about is the performance of the organization. And we all know a big part of that is cultural.
Yeah.
And I imagine PE firms are trying to figure out how to change the culture of the organization that they have acquired or purchased. And again, it starts at change the way we run high stakes meetings.